everybody, and welcome to episode 46 of All About African Violets. All About African Violets is musically sponsored by Ted Yoder. You can hear and purchase his awesome music on his website at tedyoder.com. Hi, you guys. You know, it feels to me like it's been a really long time since I spoke with you because last week, as you know, I was traveling again, so I had to record very early in the week. And, you know, I like doing that because I want you to have an episode to watch on Sundays, but it's also kind of hard because then I feel like it's been so long since we've chatted. And it's been another very interesting week here in Chicagoland. Winter came back. It was in the low 40s yesterday, really cold. And today, again, a little chilly in the 50s, but the sun is out now, kind of back and forth. It was gloomy this morning, tried to rain again. But, you know, when you see this, it'll be tomorrow. It's Saturday morning when I'm Saturday afternoon when I'm recording, and tomorrow is Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to everyone. I hope you have a wonderful and great day. Whether you are a mom or you're celebrating with your mom, have a great Mother's Day. So I am not going to talk too long today because today is the last of the questions from Question Day. You guys asked so many great ones. I mean, I can't get over it that we're still talking about it. And this episode is going to be slightly longer than normal because I decided I would go ahead because I truly could have split it one more time, but we'll just get them all out of the way now, get them all answered, I should say, because I do have some things I want to share with you next week. So I did love that a number of you went out and sourced your own copies of the Miracle House Plants book. I know we talked about that last week, so pretty cool. I'm glad you guys did that. So we're going to move right into tips and treasures because, as I said, it is Question Day Part 3. And I did get my African Violet magazine. I got it yesterday in the mail, but I decided I'm going to hold off and share that with you next week so that we can go right in and get started with these questions. So I will see you on the other side. Then Lori had a question. This is great. She says, question week, more on leaching. What amount of water to pour through the plant, reasons for doing it, aftercare of the plants, and leaching versus repotting. All very good questions. Now, you guys know, again, this is a multiple choice, so to speak. I don't leach unless, I did try to leach before I went to National last year in a last-ditch effort to save my plants. Dale Martins leaches regularly. I think that Joyce and Kent also leach from pretty regularly as well, so maybe I need to start. But I'm sort of the opinion, really, that if you are repotting regularly, and let me repeat this in case this is on another episode, for standards, that's at least every 6 months, and for minis and semis, every 3 to 4 months. If you are repotting regularly, I don't think it's generally necessary to leach. But if you want to try it, it is not that hard to do. When I did it before National last year, trying to save my plants, I used distilled water. Joyce told me to use distilled water because distilled water sucks everything into it because it has nothing, so it grabs minerals and salts and sucks it in and then drenches it out the bottom of the pot. And I said to her, I would really like your thoughts on this one since I don't do this and Dale does do it. And what Joyce says is Ann and Richard Nicholas, they are great growers and hybridizers in Texas. She says they also leach faithfully once a month. Kent does it fairly often, especially when he starts to notice the leaves haloing. How much water? At least twice the volume of the pot is ideal. That's a pint or so for a 4-inch pot. The water should be at room temperature so you don't shock the roots. feel the temperature of the water that's been sitting out, and then set the tap to match that. And then this is tap water that she's talking about here. Pour it into the top of the pot, rotating the pot so that the water pressure pushes out all the old salt saturated water. Allow all the water to drain away. If you really need to leach, you will notice that the exiting water out the bottom of the pot is somewhat orange. In that case, you need to keep adding water until it runs clear, or just repot. I love that. So, Lori, there again, a couple ways you can go, 2 schools of thought. So I hope that is helpful for you. I got another piece of paper here, because Lori has another question, and she says, I see you turn the plants on the What's on the Stand segment. Some of my plants look like little pinwheels. Am I turning them the right way? Especially if I pick up a plant, now I've forgotten where it was, I wonder how I should face it when I put it back, or if I'm just making it dizzy. Okay, I do this, I do it regularly. You guys see me do it every week. You don't have to overthink this one. Just give your plants a little turn, maybe every day when you check them, or every other day, see how they're growing. Plants, the violets lean toward the light. And you want them to not be growing this way. You want them to be growing straight up, so that the whole plant and the crown, everything is even. You don't want it to look tilted in the pot. So that's why I give them a turn, because I'll see them as we're there. Oh, it's leaning toward the light, so I will turn it so that now it's leaning this way, so that then it will naturally straighten itself back up and then begin to lean again. So ideally, you want to be kind of checking it and giving it a little turn, maybe a little more often, and keep moving it around. It's not going to get dizzy. It's just going to keep it growing in a more symmetrical and straight manner. And it's a good thing to do. So then I have one from Zal. Hi, Zal. Zal's a newbie. Says, I have a question about blooming true. I put down a leaf of Starry Night Blue. Starry Night Blue again, it's coming up, which is supposed to have a semi-double to double blossom. The first blooms look single, though one of the blooms has a tiny extra petal. Is there any hope of the plant ever putting out blooms that have more petals? In general, will later blooms ever look different from the initial blooms? Thanks. Well, this is a really good question, because in my personal experience, generally, no, but there's always a but. But when I'm talking about blooming true, usually it's about the description of the plant, not so much if it's a single or a semi-double or double. It's supposed to be a fantasy blossom, but I'm not seeing the fantasy. It's supposed to be this color, but it bloomed a completely different color. In those instances, in my experience, that doesn't change going forward. But I asked Joyce about this one too, and this is great, because she says, I actually have to tell you also that one little petal, that little extra petal that's right there in the middle, that makes that blossom a semi-double blossom. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but that's what that is. And I said to Joyce, I don't know about this, because I've never encountered it before. And what she says there are some traits that sport and some that just hide. She said, I would not throw away a plant that wasn't showing double on the first bloom. Often these first buds are a little juvenile. In fact, we often take off the first flowers just to encourage the plant to mature a bit. Since fertilizer and culture can affect the doubleness of the flowers, I definitely would be patient for that trait. Similarly, some violets with edges won't show the edge in hot weather, and intense colors tend to fade in the heat. Variegates change the color of leaves significantly based on the temperature. On the other hand, Discard a new plant that lacks the fantasy markings, the color, not the shade, or the general shape of the flower and foliage listed in the registered description. So Joyce is saying what I just said in a different way, but adding to all of our knowledge, mine included, about the single, semi, double type thing, that maybe in those you could give an extra bloom cycle to and see how they do. Zal, that was those great questions in your question there. I hope that this answer helps you. Gabrielle says, while I was trying to grow a show plant, she says, not because I was taking it to show, but just because, I realized how hard it was to keep the blooms fresh. I was wondering if that has something to do with the timing, with the use of fertilizers and increased light, etc. I've heard from several people that blooms become spent faster in too high light. I'm wondering if that's what's happening with mine. I have them under a 6500K T5 bulb. That's one of the newer ones, guys. But I have a paper towel between the fixture and the plant so that the intensity is reduced by the time it reaches the plant. How long do blooms usually last? Another great question. And you're using different bulbs, different tubes than what I use. Now, I've never heard that about lights becoming spent faster, but it makes sense to me because, in my last ditch effort before Illinois, I turned up the light that last week, for an hour to try to get them to come into bloom. And, another thing, and I want to find this because I had asked about this because mine weren't coming into bloom, and Joyce and I were talking about it, and I said, would you ask Kent, because he's a tremendous show grower, and he said, Kent says you can know that you have hit it right when you have blossoms open 2 weeks before show. Those are the ones that should be removed. If you don't have those, then you just do your best to push the plant along, knowing that it will probably be an also ran, meaning that it's probably not going to bring home any big ribbons. Okay, she says a few varieties open quickly at the end, and others, especially green ones, take much longer, but the 2-week measure works well for Kent most of the time. So, so light does have some bearing, obviously, on our blossoms. And then she says, see all the stuff in red? That's all the stuff Joyce sent me. She says, except for green flowers, most blossoms last really only 2 weeks. If a blossom is open 2 weeks before the show, Kent removes that blossom. If after that, he allows all the flowers to open as they come. Remind your viewer that growing for show, and this is great, growing for show means growing so the plant hits its peak on show day. No show plant lasts for long. Your big box violet is a better example of how to grow well every day. You allow it to bloom when it feels like it, but you still turn it, still maintain its symmetry, and fuss with it a little so that it looks very nice nearly all the time. And that is such a great point. And when you see, if you've seen the big box violet recently here, it's gorgeous right now. It's blooming. It has quite a few blossoms, and it's just hanging out in its commercial mix that has fertilizer in it in a self-watering pot in the east window of my sunroom. So, light, it does make a difference, but show plants are kind of a different animal, but it's cool for you to experiment with that as well. So, but no, and it's good to know that probably they're not going to last, all those blossoms, not going to last too much longer than a couple of weeks. So I hope that was helpful. And then Gabrielle has a second question. She said, also mentioned in this week's episode that you wouldn't use soil with fertilizer already included with it for your show plants. Just talked about that with the big violet box. Why? Is it because it's harder to control the amount of fertilizer when trying to adjust the plant's blooming cycle for show? Although I don't have the time and the opportunity to go to shows and put my African violets up for show, I do want to learn how to make them look like show plants. Show plants just look nicer. Well, they do look nicer, because they're blooming and you've been fussing with it. So the reason that I don't use a mix with fertilizer in it for my show plants is exactly what you said. When I have plants on the pre-show schedule, I, as the grower, need to have the control over how much fertilizer, when it gets fertilized, how much light it gets. I have to have control, how much water it gets. I have to have control over all of that to hopefully force it to bloom and look its best for show day. But the big box violet, as Joyce said, I'll share this again. She says, the big box violet is a better example of how to grow well every day. You allow it to bloom when it feels like it, but you still turn it, you still maintain its symmetry, and you fuss with it a little so it looks nice nearly all the time. And you repot it regularly, about every 6 months. I repot it, then it gets a new boost of fertilizer and it goes on its merry way. So I hope that I keep taking my glasses off and on. So those were the majority of my questions. Now I had a couple more, and unfortunately these came after I talked with Joyce, so she may want to weigh in on these in the weeks to come. But Joy had a question, and she says, "Hi Annie, how important is water pH to the plant?" Okay, I think my camera cut off in the middle of what I was doing, so I had a question from Joy. So I'm going to start over with this one. Joy says, "Hi Annie, how important is water pH to the plant? I am noticing slow and small center growth in my plants, including recently repotted plants." She must have known that I was going to say, when was the last time you repotted? That'd be my first thing. She says, "The potting mix that I use is a mixture of perlite and peat moss, the pH of which is 6.5 to 6.8, which is fine, I understand. To this mix, I add another 2 portions of perlite for every 1 of potting mix for wick watering. My fertilizer is Dyna-Gro or Optimara 14-12-14 at 1/8 of a teaspoon per gallon. However, my local water has a pH of 7.4 to 7.6. Is this too high? And could this be the problem? I would appreciate your thoughts. Thanks." Well, Joy, this is one of the questions I didn't have a chance to check in with Joyce about, and so she is liable to weigh in on this later on in another episode. But yes, the pH is important. I mean, I try to stick right around 6.5. That's what I look for. I use, I haven't tested my soil mix in quite a while, because the mix I use is called the Sunshine Mix. I get it from Gary Makita, and Gary's out of Africa. And it works really, really well for me with my water in my growing conditions. And this is something to always take into consideration. The water that comes out of your tap is a big piece of how you grow. And we talked about water or in earlier questions, and there are great chapters in both Pauline's book and Joyce and Kent's book about water. And I really encourage you to read those and get that knowledge, have that knowledge at hand. 6.5 is kind of what I shoot for. And if I think you are not in the country, but if any of the rest of you are going to National, I highly encourage you to attend the presentation that's going to be given by Dr. Barbara Pershing and Carolee Carter. Barbara was our speaker at the Illinois State Show, and this is what they're talking about, is soil mixes, pH, problems that people have been having. And Barbara has done a tremendous amount of research in this area. And this is her handout. It says, "Don't guess, test," that she gave us in Illinois. And she kind of did a test run with us, which was great. And she says usually between 6.5 and 6.9 is ideal for violets. And she says pH testing is the only way to ensure that the potting medium you use is within this range. And you can test. She has a number of different things. You can use test strips, and you can test like a soil tester, like a digital meter, although those are kind of spendy. They're about $100. And there's a slurry method to test, and she uses pH test strips with that as well. I mean, there are a variety of ways to do this. And if you have checked everything else, you're repotting regularly, I'm wondering, you said you're doing 2-to-1 on the perlite, so 2 perlite to 1 soil, and that's because you wick, and that is a very light mix, even lighter than mine, which is pretty light, and I do about 1-to-1. So that's something to maybe consider, that maybe is it possible that it could be too light? I'm not sure. I'll do a little further research on this one. But if you've checked everything and nothing seems to be doing, then definitely check your pH of your water. When you put fertilizer in the water, it will drop the pH to some degree. It depends on the fertilizer and how much fertilizer you are using, how much it will drop it. For example, my regular fertilizer that I use, the Optimara one, it drops it a little bit, but not much. And so I use like part tap water and part water through my Brita pitcher. And sometimes I will use something called pH Down, which is an aquarium product for fish. But I haven't had to use it lately. I've had a pretty good mix. I changed the filter in my Brita pitcher a couple months ago, so I think it's still doing pretty well. But I do test the pH periodically. And anytime you use a different fertilizer, you should definitely test the pH. I used a Bloom Booster during the pre-show schedule for National, and I used a different one this time. It's called Open Sesame. And it really dropped the pH. I was like, whoa, I need to put some more tap water in here, because my tap water is very high. It's like navy blue on the schedule. It's very high. So again, this is kind of a balancing act, and there's chemistry involved. So I know my friend Joyce Stork is going to want to weigh in, because she loves chemistry and she's the scientist. So yes, test your pH. It could be something, it could be what's happening for you. I know that's a very ambivalent answer, kind of, yeah, maybe, but again, it could be a number of other things, and again, it's hard to know without starting to try things and eliminate stuff. So I would definitely test the pH and start there. So I hope that helps. And our last question from Question Week, which has now stretched into at least 1 or 2 more weeks, is from Irene. And she said, boy, I hope I can double dip, because she had more than one question. She said, I'm wondering about wick watering. So far, I've managed to learn by trial and error, and Irene, that's how we all learn, by trial and error, that it's not a good idea to repot and immediately put a pot on a reservoir, especially in cases where the plant has had a soil change to a new potting medium, or when the plant does not already have a robust root system. Is there a rule of thumb about moving plants to wick watering? If one is converting to wick watering, the soil must be changed to lighten it up, correct? Does it need a greenhouse treatment where it's kept damp? If so, how long? If not, at what point can one use reservoirs full time? Irene, this is a really great question, and I think that it deserves probably its own episode. So I'm just going to tell you briefly that I use a relatively light mix. I start with wicks in all of my pots from the time I put the leaves down. There's always a wick, but there's always a layer of perlite, so that there's a buffer between the water and the soil. So there's always air space, even if the soil stays moist with wicking water up, there's always air space that the roots can get to. So you do need a lighter mix if you're going to wick. I use about 1-to-1 potting mix and perlite. Others use more. And again, this is going to be a trial and error. So I don't know that there's any specific time. I don't put my plants on reservoirs all the time. I saucer water each of them individually, but I keep an eye on them. And of course, for show, I put them on reservoirs. And if I'm traveling, I put them on reservoirs. Other people use reservoirs all the time. So let me take a look and see what else I can find. And I think we'll have an episode devoted to this, because we've had a lot of questions about it lately. Thank you for your question. Well, guys, I'll be right back. That's all the questions. See you in a minute. Great questions, you guys. And I think you might be glad now, though, that they're all answered. I want to show you some things next week. I'm going to do some filming this week, because I'm going to be working on my plants. So you'll see. I'll share that footage with you next time. But right now, it's time to take a look at what's on the stands, and there are some interesting things on the stands. There are some new blossoms, and there are some things going on with some of the show plants, the show hopefuls. So take a look, and I'll be right back. Hi everybody, it's time to take a look at what's on the stands, and here we are in the guest room, and here are the show hopefuls, and you can see some things going on that I'm kind of weirded out about, actually. But this is Blueberry Sprite. The blooms don't look to be quite as deep of a blue as they were last time, but I think they're growing. And that is Pixie Blue. It's looking pretty good. And this is Rob's Tauruca. Also looking pretty good, but it's got some stuff going on. This is Rob's Sarsaparilla. I'm trying to get it so that you can see the top. And I'm too close for you to really see it. It looks to me, and I mentioned this last week, that it might have split at the crown. And I said the same thing about this one, about Rob's Antique Rose. And yeah, they did, and they split very strangely, and I really don't know what to do about that. I think I'm going to take leaves of both of these plants and then try to restart them and start over with them, but I don't think they're going to show. Nothing going on here with Max Glacial Grape. It's just now starting to form some buds. And actually, Rob's Antique Rose, no buds at all. Here's Geisha Girl. And I'm not sure it likes being on the reservoir. It's got a leaf here hanging down, and the same thing with Sarsaparilla, which does have buds. I'm going to see if I can remove those, the leaves that really aren't part of the crown. We'll see how that goes. This is Rob's Tauruca. And let me turn it. Here are its little pink blossoms on that crown. Unfortunately, on this crown, not pink, blue, purple. So I will remove that, and we'll see what the other, and it's on the same crown. I really don't get that, so I'm not sure what's going on there. And it also needs some grooming, which I would like to try to do this coming week and show it to you next week. And same here with Pixie Blue, needs some grooming, some leaves, some things need to come off, and it's blooming pretty well. So right now, we're about 3 weeks out from National. Pixie Blue's looking good. Blueberry Sprite is a hopeful, and if all these buds open on Tauruca and they're blooming true, it's hopeful too. So this is how things go, guys. And I still don't have any real standards. I mean, I really feel that is my forte. That's what I do well, is grow standards. So you guys have been with me all this year while I'm growing semis and minis. It's been an interesting journey. And we're looking at Fisherman's Paradise, which is ready to be repotted. Now we're on the second shelf, Gala Pink. Here is Reflections of Spring. Why can I never remember that? It's getting ready to bloom again. Powwow. Fresh Air. Smooch Me. And over there is Jean-Pierre Croteau, which is getting ready to bloom, and I'm going to let it bloom. I want to see it bloom. Down here on the third shelf, that's Optimara Hawaii. There is House of Amani. It's starting to drop its blossoms. And this is Jersey Girl Trail. I don't know if you can see. It's finally, it looks like it's starting to sprout a bunch of crowns out of the center there. I kind of twisted the two center leaves off of the crown initially to get it to start to have multiple crowns. Things looking pretty good down here. Let's go around this side. You can take a closer look. Sorry, picture of the door there. Here's Jean-Pierre Croteau. It is definitely ready to be repotted, but I decided to wait now until it actually blooms, till I see it bloom. And we got a sucker there on Hot Tamales. And you can see the blossoms that have fallen off there on House of Amani. Let's go take a look down in the basement. Well, here we are down in the basement, and everybody's growing, just kind of doing their thing. There's Fisherman's Paradise, and I'm going to show you those together soon, and you're going to see the huge difference between being down here and being upstairs. This is Ajon's Winter Sun. This is the Sport, and it's so interesting looking. I really do like it. I wanted to let it bloom again to see if it bloomed, consistently with that pinkish yellowish blossom, and it's really very cool. Here is Buckeye Lost Love. I want to turn it. We can see it. It is finally starting to open up here. Kind of looking like a little cabbage head. Pink with a, looks like almost a greenish edge. I need to look that up, make sure it's blooming true. It's very lovely. And in the dome, in the humidity dome, everything, some algae going on, things just hanging out. Not much happening yet, but things look good. Here are the show plants, still hanging out down here. And they're growing. Now, this is interesting because I already turned the plants upstairs the other day, so you didn't get to see me do that. But one of the questions this week was about turning plants. And if you see Roulette, I'm trying to show it to you from this side. Now, do you see here that it's kind of leaning this way? It's leaning, here's the light, and here's the plant. It's leaning toward the light. So what you want to do is just give it a turn, and now it will start to even itself out, because now see it looks a little crooked, looks like it's leaning this way, and that's just regular turning. Same thing here. This is Optimara Ontario, and it's trying to lean this way toward the light. So I'm just going to take it and give it a turn. And again, don't really have to overthink that one. If they look like they're leaning, give them a turn to keep them even. Let's go take a look over at the Streptocarpus stand. This is where all the color is today, you guys. This is Blue Mars, and a couple things going on here. It is blooming, first of all, and it's gorgeous. Do you see those white dots? That is powdery mildew, which is telling me that this stand is over a little bit, and the air, as I've mentioned before, in my basement does not circulate quite as well as it might. So I've got a fan somewhere. I'm going to take that leaf, I'm going to wash it and let it, I'm going to remove it actually, and wash the rest of the plant and keep an eye on it, because they usually like to be down here. The streps seem to like this spot better usually than upstairs, and that is the only one that has any mildew on it. Here's Midnight Flame again, looking just gorgeous. And here's Dale's Polar Berry. This is a variegated strap, and it's got a great dark edge to it. It's really interesting, and the blossom is like reddish magenta purple. It's beautiful. Here's Heartland's White Gold blooming, and here is Salmon Sunset also blooming. And here's Dancing Trail. I'm telling you, not happy. You can see the new growth looks good, but the existing growth really resented having Marathon put in the soil. Not quite sure what's up with that. I have some cleanup to do and probably some leaves to put down just for insurance. And here is Chiffon Masquerade, looking good. Let's go back upstairs. Here's a short stop to check out my Petrocosmia carrii. Looks pretty good. It's like living here in the kitchen. And here we are. You can see it's actually, it was very gloomy earlier and it rained a little, but the sun is out now. And here you can get a real good view. This is Autumn Blues. And do you see that it is tilted like this? It is growing toward the light. So all you need to do, and I probably should have caught this sooner, is turn it so that it can straighten itself out and grow more evenly. Optipara, little Wichita girl, really blooming. But I did take a look at this one today. Let me move it down here so you can kind of see it. It has the worst possible symmetry ever. It's not looking good. And the blossoms are starting to go on some of it. So it needs to get cleaned up a little. This is Jersey Snowflakes. And I am really, really pleased with it. Kind of wish there were more blossoms on it, or that it waited like another 2 weeks to bloom, because I would have taken that to national. Really nice. Here, I just turned this one. This is the champagne pinks that I need to separate. And here's everybody else looking pretty good. Selena Dark Velvet. Look over here. Walk this way. Walk this way. Okay, here's my what's supposed to be Sassy Sister. It does have a very light shading of pink in the blossom, right in the center there. But man, this really looks like Irish Flirt to me. It does not look like Sassy Sister. Curses, foiled again. Okay, got a little bit of powdery mildew there on that leaf of Cool Blue. So I'll need to look into that. Let's take a look at the Gesneriad shelf, and hey, looky, can you see that my Texas hot chili is getting ready to bloom? Ooh, I'm very excited about that. And here's Moonlit Velvet, which really has beautiful foliage and a gorgeous blossom, but they fall off and there's only one blossom per stalk. I know I've said that before, and now I got to take it back because look, I've got a blossom stalk that's got two. So maybe it just needed some time. Here's Ascananthus obconicus. It's starting to sprout in the center there, which leads me to believe I should probably trim some of these long vining pieces off to encourage it to sprout a little more from the center. And here are my calumnias. This is Firebird, and you can see that when I trimmed it, now it's growing quite well. And here are its pieces that I cut off, and you can see plenty of leaves. So time for me to get them into the pot. Same with Apollo, really looking so much better. And again, there's the roots and trying to bloom. So everything's looking pretty good here on the Gesneriad shelf. Let's go take a look at the big box violet. Oh yeah, I did what I said I was going to do. I moved over here. I moved the conservatory stand, and I moved that was an empty thing to hold the plant. I moved it over here, and I put the big box violet right on it. And now, guys, I gotta tell you, right now, this plant could go to show. You know, the symmetry is not ideal, but there are not 10 points to come off of this plant. And I sure wish I knew what it was, but I don't. I got it at a big box store, which is why we call it the big box violet. But boy, is it happy in this window. Now it just has the pieces of my spider plant hanging down around it, and it's growing in the same light, and it's out in the open here. So, alrighty, well, that's the look at what's on the stands this week. I'll be right back. Interesting about those show plants, isn't it? The only thing that I did any differently this time on the pre-show schedule was I used a different bloom booster fertilizer than the one I normally use. And maybe those plants, the two Robs, Rob's Sarsaparilla and Rob's Antique Rose, maybe they just didn't like it. you just never know. But it's always good to try new things. And every pre-show schedule is a crapshoot. You just don't. You do your best, and then you see what happens. Sometimes temperature isn't great. Sometimes everything goes perfectly and everything moves forward. I have to say I feel a little inadequate. I really consider myself a standard grower, and I've had one standard all year, Western Moon, that I've taken twice to show, and it's got a blue ribbon both times. But I haven't had, a lot of, I took a couple others with me to Illinois, but they were very, very young. So I really have not had what I consider to be my best plants. So this has been such an interesting year for me. This is week 46. We've been doing this, meeting each other every week for almost a year. And it's certainly been a year of learning for me. And I hope it's been a learning year for you guys too. I'm really glad that you're here with me. And hey, it's time to get the bail money ready. So, we've had all those shows week after week. Things are starting to calm down. There was only one show listed on the AVSA website this week. It's in Medford, New Jersey. It is the African Violet Club of Burlington County, and they are having their annual judged show and plant sale on May 18th from 12 noon until 5 p.m. In Medford, New Jersey. So if you're in that area, I really urge you to go and enjoy yourself. I got a message from a woman on Ravelry. She had gone to a show. She found a show in her area. She's in Montana. Hi, Johanna. She went and she said she had the best time. She said she met great people. She came home with some beautiful plants. And, going to show, even if you are not participating, if you're just going to see it, it's always so much fun. And I really encourage you, if there is a show in your area, to check it out. Well, you guys, it's time to keep moving forward. And this time, before we move right on, I really wanted to share a little bit with you because I had kind of an exciting thing happen a couple of times this last weekend. As you know, I was traveling. I was in Virginia and Maryland I've always wanted to go to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival. It is one of, if not the largest sheep and wool festival, fiber festival in the country. This was its 40th year anniversary, and I got the opportunity kind of at the last minute, just within about 3 weeks prior, that I could go. So the next day, I went to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival with this daughter of a friend of mine, and we had a wonderful time. And as we were walking in one building, a woman came up to me and she said, "I watch your podcast. I watch your podcast, the Violet Podcast, all about African violets." And I was like, oh. There's a viewer who's also a knitter, and her name is Cindy. So Cindy, it was great to meet you last weekend in Maryland. And I posted a photo of us. I was having a very bad hair day. I'm still having a bad hair day. I'm getting another haircut. They cut it, but they didn't cut enough, I guess. I'm getting another haircut tomorrow. Anyway, it was really exciting to meet one of you who watch every week and enjoy the podcast. So thank you. Cindy, thank you so much for coming up and introducing yourself. It was really kind of fun, and that has never happened before. It's like, wow. So I just thought I'd share that with you because it was just a lot of fun. But I also wanted to share with you something that I came home with from the festival. This is fiber. This is what yarn looks like before it's yarn. This is in between when it comes off the sheep and before it gets to be yarn. But this is what we call a bump of fiber. It's 4 ounces. It weighs 4 ounces theoretically. 4 ounces is enough to spin for a pair of socks. I have not been able to do that quite yet, but I'm close. I can get about 360 yards instead of 400 out of a bump of fiber like this. This is roving. It means it's been blended. It's been carded, not combed. That's kind of a technical term for those of you who don't spin. I won't bore you with it. But I loved the colors. It is a beautiful green and a beautiful plummy raspberry, dark, kind of like an African violet. It made me think of violets. The colorway is called Grapevine, and it made me think of my plants, and that's why I had to come home with it. This is from Winter Haven Fiber Farm. It's hand dyed, and it is a mixed blue-faced Leicester, which is a type of sheep. So it's blue-faced Leicester, and it's 15% silk. So those two fibers were blended together to create this, and it's nice and soft because it has silk in it. And I just thought I'd share it with you guys. Well, thank you for joining me this week. Thank you for joining me every week. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for making the podcast popular, for sharing it with your friends. I am so glad that you've been here with me again this week. I hope that your days are filled with all the things you love. Good growing. I'll see you next time.